For centuries, the Roman war machine crushed its enemies with brutal efficiency. They didn't just win battles, they built an empire that stretched across continents. But what was the secret behind their unstoppable conquest? Today, we reveal the hidden war code of Rome, the ruthless strategies that made them the ultimate superpower of the ancient world. Before a single sword was drawn, Roman generals already had the battle halfway won. Unlike their enemies, who often relied on improvisation, the Romans approached war like a carefully crafted game of chess. Their first move? Knowledge. Roman commanders meticulously studied maps, gathering intelligence from local sources before their armies ever set foot on enemy soil. Every river, mountain, and road was analyzed. No campaign was left to chance. But information alone wasn't enough. To maintain the element of surprise, generals relied on a vast network of informants and local guides. If a scout returned with news of a dangerous ambush, routes would be changed, and strategies would be adjusted on the spot. Rome didn't march blindly into battle. They controlled the battlefield before it even existed. And then came the soldiers, no ordinary warriors, but disciplined killing machines. Roman recruits endured months of grueling training before they ever saw combat. They were drilled relentlessly in formations, weapon handling, and endurance, turning them into an elite force capable of fighting for hours without breaking ranks. This training wasn't just about strength, it was psychological warfare. The Jewish historian Josephus wrote that Roman drills were bloodless battles, designed to make actual combat feel second nature. When Roman soldiers marched onto the battlefield, they weren't scared. Their enemies, however, were often terrified before the fighting even began. Behind the scenes, another unseen force kept the legions moving: logistics. A Roman army wasn't just thousands of men, it was a massive, mobile city. Generals spent years planning supplies, transport, and storage. Every soldier had a daily ration of food and water. Every march was calculated to avoid hunger or exhaustion. Where other armies starved, Rome thrived, and they moved with military precision. Roman legions didn't just march. They advanced like an unstoppable wave, with supply wagons protected at the center, scouts positioned ahead, and engineers clearing the path. Every movement was calculated to minimize vulnerability and maximize control. But Rome's real power lay in its ability to reshape the battlefield itself. Their soldiers weren't just warriors, they were engineers. They built roads to speed up reinforcements, cut down forests to deny cover to enemies, and even diverted rivers to create natural barriers. No matter where they fought, they bent the land to their will. And when night fell, the Romans didn't leave anything to chance. Every evening, they built fortified marching camps, complete with trenches, wooden stakes, and watchtowers. It was exhausting work, but it made surprise attacks nearly impossible. While enemy forces slept vulnerable under the open sky, the Romans rested behind walls of their own making. When battle finally came, Rome never hesitated. Unlike many armies that waited in fear, hoping for the perfect moment, the Romans preferred to take the field first. They understood that morale could be more decisive than numbers. An army that believed it was destined to win could shatter an enemy force twice its size. And morale was everything. A Roman general knew that battles weren't won when the first swords clashed. They were won when the enemy broke ranks and ran. More soldiers died during retreats than in actual combat. Rome's goal wasn't just to defeat their enemies, it was to break their spirit. To do this, they mastered psychological warfare. They marched into battle well-fed, well-rested, and fully confident in victory. At the same time, they spread fear among their enemies, whether through relentless discipline, brutal displays of force, or clever deception. An opponent who feared Rome was already halfway defeated. But brute force wasn't enough. Rome's greatest generals knew that terrain could win battles before they even started. They carefully selected battlegrounds that played to their strengths, choosing high ground, natural choke points, or places where they could outmaneuver their foes. They never fought on an enemy's terms, and when an enemy thought they had the upper hand, the Romans had one more trick: ambushes. Hidden units, flanking maneuvers, and sudden cavalry charges turned the tide of countless battles. Commanders like Gaius Marius perfected the art of deception, drawing enemies into traps and striking when they least expected it. All of this was possible because of Rome's standardized military structure. While their enemies often fought as disorganized groups with mismatched equipment, every Roman army followed the same system. No matter where they fought, their formations, commands, and tactics remained the same: making them one of the most adaptable forces in history. And they weren't alone. Rome didn't just rely on legions, its auxiliary forces played a crucial role. Light infantry harassed enemies, cavalry pursued retreating foes, and elite foreign troops filled gaps where needed. While heavy infantry formed the backbone, these specialized units gave Rome an edge over unpredictable enemies. But when the moment of decision arrived, it was the legions, the heavy infantry, that delivered the killing blow. Held in reserve until the perfect moment, they were unleashed like a hammer, smashing through weakened enemy lines and ensuring total victory. Yet, for all their power, Roman generals didn't lead from the front. Unlike heroic warriors of other cultures, they weren't there to swing swords, they were there to command. Standing at vantage points, they read the battlefield, adjusted formations, and inspired troops with speeches. Their job wasn't to fight, it was to win. And perhaps the most shocking part? There was no formal military education for these generals. Rome didn't train its leaders in academies. They learned through experience, from history, and from each other. The best commanders weren't just warriors, they were masterminds, carefully studying past battles to refine their own strategies. But this lack of formal military education didn't mean Roman generals were unprepared. In fact, it made them even more adaptable. They weren't bound by rigid academic theories. They learned directly from war itself. The best commanders spent their youth serving under experienced leaders, observing victories, analyzing mistakes, and absorbing the hard-earned wisdom of past campaigns. A Roman general was expected to be more than just a tactician. He was a politician, a strategist, and, most importantly, a master of people. Unlike many of his enemies, he didn't command through sheer force or divine right. He led by earning the respect of his troops. Soldiers fought not just for Rome, but for their general. The best leaders, like Julius Caesar and Scipio Africanus, inspired fanatical loyalty. Troops would march through hell for them. And that was no accident. Roman generals understood that war wasn't just about formations and strategies. It was about men. A commander who could inspire his soldiers could make them fight longer, harder, and with greater determination than an enemy who simply followed orders out of fear. At the same time, a general had to balance discipline with motivation. Rome's strict military code meant that disobedience or cowardice could lead to brutal punishments, sometimes even execution. But the best generals didn't rely on fear alone. They knew when to reward their men, when to share in their hardships, and when to give them rest. A well-treated soldier was a loyal soldier. A loyal soldier was an unstoppable force. Yet, even the greatest general was nothing without the Roman system behind him. Rome's war machine wasn't just built on genius leadership. It was built on an entire structure that ensured continuity. Generals came and went, but the legions remained. This was what truly made Rome unstoppable. While their enemies often depended on a single brilliant leader, like Hannibal or Pyrrhus, Rome produced a steady stream of capable commanders. If one fell in battle, another took his place. The empire didn't crumble when it lost a general. It adapted, evolved, and struck back even harder. Rome didn't just create great warriors, it created a system that manufactured victory. And that's why, even against legendary opponents, Rome always had the final move.